My guest today is Hubert Palan. You may know him as the CEO of Productboard, and I guess formerly one of my bosses, actually, at one point in time here at Productboard, which is pretty cool too. But Hubert is the founder and CEO and has been driven by a passion for building truly excellent products. He started the company when he saw a hole in the market for a dedicated product management platform. And before that was the VP of product management at Good Data and also a management consultant at Accenture. Hubert does a lot of different stuff on the side, including being a dad, parent, and husband. He also advises and mentors different startups and teams at entrepreneurship contests, and has been really active as well in his alma mater, UC Berkeley, where he got his MBA, and at the Czech Technical University, where he got his MSc in computer science. Wow, lots of accomplishments, Hubert. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for the introductions.
No problem. So I'm going to jump in just by people maybe start putting their first AMA questions in, and we get them kind of warmed up a little bit here. But I'm going to start maybe with a bit of the origin story. You know, Productboard came out of your own experiences working in product, both as a PM and as a product leader. What about sort of discovery and understanding customer needs really frustrated you at that time that led you to, I guess, start to create Productboard? Or was it like maybe roadmaps for the frustration or something else? But I assume it was really just stitching together that sort of customer story of the key problems.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about it. Thank you everybody for being here. I know this is early morning on the West Coast, and obviously for those of you that are well in the day, a lot happened already today, including an invasion to Ukraine. So I feel a little weird talking about product management on these days where there's important things happening. But let's do this, because obviously innovation doesn't stop, even though humanity has crazy ways of approaching lives. I just can't believe it. All right, to your question. This is a group of product makers, right? So people know how collaborative the whole process is to try to get out the product out of the door. And probably mostly people here are building digital products. And really, the beginning was that there was this whole lean startup was starting when I got my MBA in 2007. I took a class of Steve Blank at the business school here, and I was inoculated with get out of the building, talk to the customers, get a close sense of the market insights as possible, which really isn't new. That's how businesses have been built, right? It's how entrepreneurship is, that you discover the problem and then you go and solve it, and you need to really understand it well in order to solve it well and bring it to the market. And there is really no system for product management that would help in a collaborative fashion consolidate all the market inputs and the insights, and then help make the product decisions. I'm still astonished if you look at the tools that we have, or we've had historically at our disposal, the Jiras, GitHubs, and a lot of great engineering task management tools. There's no entity of a customer, no entity of a problem. Just it's bizarre. Right? It just doesn't exist in those systems. Yet product management is about customers, their pain points, and then what products and services you're going to offer to them. And out of these three, the people, problems, and products, people and problems are nowhere to be found. And so that was kind of just this is crazy. CRM is for the go-to-market, and everything is about customers, and you have all the nodes, and everything is there to sell and serve them better. And on the product side, we don't have anything like that to help us figure out what is the right thing to build. We have tools to help us organize. So, I'm happy to talk more about it. I'm very passionate about it. But I hope that people feel it and realize it, and that, the idea that you're sitting there with so many people trying to get the best product out of the door, and really the central brain is a spreadsheet or, a wiki somewhere, or a, slew of PowerPoints. It's I don't get it. It's just so inefficient.
Yeah. So what were you putting yourself again back to that seat is what were you stitching together at that time? What was your tool stack maybe in that horrible situation?
It was definitely, so I've done I mean, I've done many things, right? Like early on, it was a startup. I joined a startup. It was a small startup. We had Pivotal Tracker, and we just track tickets, but it was real on the engineering side, right? It's just like, okay, let's just stories and points and kind of like the delivery aspect of it. But on the product side, I would copy paste things into spreadsheets. I would try to like show evidence of market segments by showing to the execs and to the decision makers. Initially I was a junior PM, right? So like my power in the organization was limited, and I just constantly was trying to point at the patterns. And people typically don't see the patterns, or the patterns are very biased by sort of like thinking bias, recency bias, or whatever bias. And so that was hard. And so I would, I knew from business school blue ocean strategy canvas, and that you can plot the different dimensions, like value dimensions or pain points. And I would draw in a PowerPoint or Keynote the charts, and I would try to explain how the segments differ, and I would plot competitors and how they satisfy the different needs differently compared to us, and so on. And I would try to narrow down the focus as much as possible to like a very specific segment and a very specific set of pain points. But it was all, number one, it took so much time to do this. Number two, it was so difficult if people ask for like justification or something, like you never had that in a way where you could quickly go and filter for a specific customer and show a proof point, or for like a specific, like a quote, right? Because people don't believe you. They don't believe you, and then they go and they watch a user research interview, or they watch a video, and suddenly like, oh my god, how come we haven't seen this and done this? So yeah, it's like chewing gum, what do you call it, like rub, whatever.
Toothpicks and chewing gum holding things together.
Yeah, makeshift solution, totally.
Okay, no, that's cool. So you've talked a lot about the importance of starting with the customer and kind of being fueled by insights. Thinking back to when you started Productboard, like how did that habit show up in the context maybe of the work you were doing that time? And then also, how did that show up in the context of the early days of Productboard, like when you were really building the system that we have today?
Yeah, I've always thought about it in a very structured way, because I wanted to make sure that we are like, you have limited resources, right? Your capacity to do things is limited. And as I mentioned, like the best way is to narrow down the focus to the narrowest segment with the biggest pain point and start there, and then be very intentional how you're going to go from there. The problem is that, like with everything in the world, typically the initial perception of the first understanding of the market is very much informed by who you are and what you know very intimately. And your ability, and the success is determined by your ability to understand the broader segment and what should be the secret. It's kind of a little bit, I used this analogy before. It's like if you're a kid and you see a cat or a tiger or a lion or bobcat or whatever, it's all a cat. It's all a cat. And then you start looking at it, right? And you start learning, it's like, oh, actually, this is kind of a different cat than that different cat. And the same thing is with people, and their problems. Like, it's like, oh, everybody, when I started product, was like, every PM needs a, customer-centric product management system, right? And it's like, well, okay, maybe, but what do they need from them? And oh, B2B is different from B2C. Oh, and it's very different if you're a junior PM versus if you're a chief product officer somewhere. Oh, and the size of the company matters, the complexity of the company matters, right? It's the way you're organized as a team. What's the organizing principle of the teams? Like, do you believe in lean startup or whatever methodology that is customer centric? Are you thinking about it from the design perspective, or are you more like a you could say, on the other hand, a dictator is just like, I just know what to do. Here's this prioritized backlog, go and build it, and trust me. It's just like, if you have that culture and belief, it's obviously the product might not resonate with you because you don't feel like you need anything, like you have utmost clarity. And so anyway, so my point is that, these are all the attributes that early on, we didn't know. I didn't know it. I was like, oh, I'm a VP product at a startup B2B, digital product, right? But digital first was different from digital transformation. B2B was different from B2C. head of product versus junior PM, like, and then there were many more criteria, right? Yep. And so, to your question, like, that's what I was trying to do. I was trying to identify these dimensions, and they only emerged along the way. Just like, when you're looking at the cat, it's like spotted, not spotted, main, no main, big teeth, small teeth, whatever. But it's like that's the customer centricity, right? It's like understanding and categorizing it, because in the absence of the system of the categorization, like, how do you convey this learning to others? And you need to do that, right? Because otherwise you can't communicate to others like, hey, this is the customer that we're building for. And, and obviously you have personas on the design side, but personas on the design side don't have that much of, business objectives, and kind of like this, the business strategic segmentation. That's not the focus, right? It's much more user driven rather than like business segmentation driven concept. Yeah. Sorry, I know I'm
No, that's good.
Many things.
No, that's good. It's many different topics. That's good answers. We got a couple questions coming in, so I'm going to start with some of those, and then maybe I'll like throw in some others as we go along. But I'm going to paraphrase some of these over to you. But like, I think what people are kind of, the first one here is from Peter Hulson, and it's, how holy is the prioritization score? Whether using, say, like, value, effort, rice, ice, whatever, or do you override the prioritization, overrule the prioritization? So I think maybe this is a common pattern where we see like, okay, I've got a bunch of things I've done as inputs into that decision, but in the end, there's maybe the art versus science. Maybe your thoughts on that topic.
Yeah. The way I think of it is that the framework was value versus complexity, or effort or simplicity, like however you want to split it. It's like, you can't argue with that. It's like, is it valuable? Is what you're trying to do solving big enough problem? Is the solution gonna have the impact that people will need to see in order to switch to the product, start using the product, and so on. So like, I don't feel like we can argue with that conceptually. And the same thing is effort, right? Like, you have limited resources, you have short life, and you need to decide how you're going to spend it, because you can't do everything. And, the more focused you are, the deeper and kind of like far-reaching impact you're going to have there. So that's like, that's my premise, right? So that's it, that matrix. Now,
do you still overrule that sometimes?
Wait. Well, no, I don't. So I don't think you can overrule it. Like, you can say, like, you can have a belief, and whether the belief is naive or whether the belief is informed by like a lot of experience and market observation and internal, like, intuition is internalized experience, right? So like, how good your intuition and that's the belief is, like, depends on what you've done in your life. So my point is that can differ, and you can sometimes argue with people like, hey, I believe it's more valuable, and obviously now the question is like how evidenced that belief is. Yeah. Or on the effort side, like, based on my experience, or like, I see a shortcut and we can do much faster effort. Now though, the question for the frameworks is more about what is value, is a very interesting conversation, because that is where you can be very vague, like value, or you can be very specific, and you can start looking at the different dimensions and make that as part of your prioritization criteria. Right, like, so that's where the conversation should be, and that's where it's partially, to your point, art, because that value is multidimensional, and what is valuable differs, or like how things are valuable differs to what we talked about earlier. It depends for whom and what problem it solves, and in the absence of that, like, you cannot have the conversation of value. And so if you have the teams, like, that's like, we conceive this like product excellence maturity framework, right? Like the matrix. And the first and simplest and really the most naive framework is like, hey, at least think about value and complexity, and, build the things that are most valuable and least complex, and kind of a no-brainer. But even having just that plotted and having conversation with people is helpful. Now the value is like, for whom, right? If you're a creative person who cares about design, Apple products are better for you. If you are, more technology focused and you want to have control and customization over the system, Android's better for you. And so like the value differs. So that needs to be reflected in your score. I know I'm giving you a very broad answer, but like, what is every product and every prioritization decision is happening in the market context, and you need to figure out how to embed that segmentation and the key attributes into the score. Right? Like are you trying to differentiate sort of yourself on a purely functional utilitarian dimension, or is emotional aspect and kind of the delight of the product important? Well, you should have that as part of value, because these are two different dimensions, right? And then obviously part of the scores, like the frequencies and recencies, like these are all dimensions. So is there like one best score? Like I would argue that on high level it doesn't really matter much which ones of these like high level scores you choose. What matters is the conversation that you have about the value underneath. And that's where the customer concept comes in. That's where the customer segmentation, that's where all the value points and the patterns and understanding your different types of markets and different types of personas come in place.
Yeah, no, that's a great point.
Conversation.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's good. We're getting some questions now coming in here too, which is great to see. Yeah, and I see Peter, thank you for that. I'm glad that answered your question, gave you some insight into that. This one from an anonymous attendee. I find that many companies are not very product mature. They misunderstand the purpose of agile, design thinking, lean startup, team roles, etc. Do you think about building Productboard in a way that helps those teams understand what it means to approach building products?
Yeah, I mean the short answer is I do. Obviously, look, like with anything, if you are a chef and you buy the best knives, it's not gonna turn you into a 3 Michelin star chef. Like you need to understand the best practices, how to chop the food properly and how to cook. Yeah, but the knives might come with a cookbook, and that helps you there. And so it's I'm joking a bit because it's a gross simplification here. But in our case, or in case of any structured system, the system has some concepts that are embedded into it and comes with a set of best practices, because workflows, or in general any flows, like the underlying data model, the entities that you have in the system, and kind of like the concepts that you subscribe to as the creator of the system, informs obviously the design and even just taxonomy of the entities and so on, right? So we try to build a system that's agnostic to like the detail specific terminology and like the details of the methodology that different teams are using, because again, you can't argue with the need for having a entity of a customer or user having a ability to consolidate insights, which really are the core or the kernel of the problem understanding, right? And then you have the feature products and so on, and then you have hierarchy of objectives, milestones, and so on and so on. The challenge is that we need to do it, and frankly, we need to do, and we are making investments into our system. We need to make it flexible for people to maybe even change the terminology. And just like in Jira, you can customize. If you're not calling something releases and you're calling it milestones, or you're not calling something objectives and you're calling it goals, like that should be flexible. But in terms of the process, like we are evangelizing the modern approach to product management, which is customer-centric, that starts with the customers and the insights from the customers and looking for patterns, and have everything backed and justified by deep understanding of the market. And so that's what you see, right? That's what you see in Productboard. It's a very unique system. It's a system that was designed from day one around the connection between the customers and the insights and the feature functionality, because that's the core of customer centricity. Understand customers first and then go and build things, as opposed to like prioritize list of features and kind of like there's a feature idea forum somewhere, people submit something, but the moment you change, you convert it into feature, like the customer context disappears. It's like, okay, thank you for the idea, but like like how many people is it relevant to later on? Has it changed? Did you build it, and did the people who had that pain point benefited? Like what are the biggest pain points of the different customer segments? Like you need that from a customer-centric management platform system, right?
Yeah, I think back like my own, like when I adopted Productboard as a customer way back in 2016, and I started using it, that was like really the lens that I took in the tool. Like it was a forcing function for exactly the behavior I was trying to model in my product org. And it helped me put the customer first and foremost. And I liked that opinionated factor of it. It really, like, to me, it gave me the ammo to say, like, why are we doing this when I don't see any customer information related to the decision about it being important? Now, that would maybe send us back to the drawing board and do more investigation or more discovery work, or even just to take it right out of the list. Like, we're not going to do this right now because it's not something that's important to our customers. Or vice versa, doing the discovery work and then being able to leverage those insights later on when we're actually doing the actual planning and discovery of the solution. I think it was a really important part of it. Yeah, that's good. So hopefully that answered that question, I think, in some good, decent way for that person. Let's jump over to Victor's question. After identifying the different criteria, segments, pain points, how do you make the decision of which segment pain point to focus on to get to the most, I guess, result impact within the limited time resources? So maybe this is playing a little bit off of some of the earlier answer that you gave.
Yeah, no, but this is an important question, right? Because that's the hard part of it, because that's the strategic part. Because like you, in every scenario, you can decide to, stick with the segment that you identified and go deeper and satisfy more, the existing needs that you're already satisfying and do them better, right? Like, with Productboard, we can invest into better prioritization and road mapping functionality, or you can go and you can add new use cases for that segment. And, maybe you do better presentation mode of the roadmaps, or maybe you do, investments into more collaborative release notes and kind of launch calendaring, like new use cases. There's many. Or you can decide, hey, the segment, we're going to shift the focus, and we're not going to focus on the persona of the core product managers. We're going to focus on the persona of the contributors and help customer success managers run better quarterly business review meetings and help salespeople communicate roadmap. And that's segment shift, right? And with the segment shift comes different set of needs. And now how you make the decision, that's the job of the product strategy, and understanding, like, is the segment big enough? Is the pain point, like in terms of the market size, right? Are there many of these types of people that fit that segment? That are the pain points? Are they valuable enough? Are you going to be differentiated? Like, sometimes you need to build first the table stakes functionality before you start building some of the differentiators. Along which dimensions you're going to differentiate. And so in our case, like, we went to the market in a very intentional way, where we started first, said, like, let's satisfy the needs of the individual product manager who has like one team, one simple workflow, and just make sure that it works for that person. And then you say, like, okay, so where to go now? Like, we could go up to like a more senior product manager, or we could go to satisfy needs of individual product managers, but who operate in larger teams. And that's what we decided to do, because it was, in retrospect, it might seem logical, but like, you kind of are there, like, which way to go. Now, like later on, the conversation is always like new use case versus existing use case, different persona. Now we want to make sure that, we satisfy the needs of multiple product teams, larger product organizations. We haven't really built much for the senior exec persona, VP product, chief product officer yet. And we want to do that. And we want to prioritize it strategically over going to the contributors and satisfying the needs of, customer success managers or sales or product marketing. And so there's so many use cases in the product space, right? And that's a strategic decision. It's a decision that, again, differentiates you. Does it create higher gravity for people to switch to your product? Like, does it keep them, or does it keep it on their platform? Does it help you with awareness, activation, acquisition, activation, engagement? Like, all this goes into it. So there's no easy answer. But the important thing is that you should have this framework, and the team that's making this strategic decision should have shared understanding of the framework and have clarity around, like, this is the strategic, this is the way we go strategically. And there's different strategies that you go to the market, right? Like, sometimes you start with a narrow segment and you go super deep and you build a product that's like very deep for that specific segment. Sometimes you could argue that Productboard is that. We are specific platform for the needs of product managers. And like, forget project management, right now the focus, like, forget the other personas initially. There's other tools, like if you look at Notion, if you look at Airtable, if you look at whatever generic task management tools, the persona is not important. They said, like, we're gonna build a generic Trello, right? We're gonna build a generic thing, and you can plan your wedding with it, or you can run product management at your company. And that's a strategic decision, the type of product that you're building. Then like when you monetize, like all of it. So yeah, I know this is kind of a, non-answer, but I hope that I cannot emphasize how important it is to have the conversation around what are the key elements of your product strategy, what are the attributes, what are the segments, what are the pain points, what are the patterns, and make sure that everybody understands that framework and the big picture. And you draw that, and you can, it's like, think of it as a map, right? Like these are the segments, these are the pain points, and this, you have conversations like we're starting here because again, ABC, importance, opportunity, size, and so on, differentiation, competitive landscape, and then we're gonna move, and invest more, and so on. And then you have a investment framework, right? Do we need to improve our table stakes, or do we need to drive more innovation? Do we have some kind of like, sometimes people call it broken windows or technical debt, or something like that needs to be built. And you're thinking about the investment allocation there, like how much you're gonna allocate there, right, in order to move the right direction. That's product strategy.
Yeah, and it's so ultimately complex, right? I mean, to your point, it's kind of it depends kind of answer, but at the same time, it does really ultimately start with understanding who your target customer is, whether the pain point and problem is big enough, and whether there's a big enough need in the market for this particular solution. Yeah. Okay, that's cool. I know we've got no questions essentially at this point, so I'm going to jump over maybe to some other ones while we wait for a few more to come in. Maybe we want to think a little bit about maybe something in the course of Productboard, maybe that we've kind of seen, maybe a feature that kind of surprised you is not being that important to customers that you thought was going to be important to customers. And so maybe through the discovery process, you went like, wow, it's really like, I was positive this is going to be the hill to die on, or a thing to do. Yeah.
Well, for us, I mean, look, for the elephant in the room for us is that everything that I'm talking to you here about customer centricity, the reality, and the question that we had also about the product maturity, the reality of the broader landscape out there is that most people don't approach product management from customer-centric perspective. And so when we built the insights functionality and like everything is architected, I'm still kind of like, I don't know if I should say amazed or aghast, but by the fact how few people really talk to customers and do the research and look for patterns and try to understand or even understand what customer segmentation is and how to approach it. And this is not like, I'm not saying it in kind of like a belittling. It just like the sophistication and that maturity is probably the right way differs. And in many organizations, it's you find the situation that like the product manager, the product leader, the product decision maker gets it, understands it, but because it's so collaborative and because you need buy-in from so many people, and because people have been doing the building the products in different way for so long, just like the change management and getting everybody on the same page takes so long that it's just not how the companies operate. And so we have many customers, and in my opinion, obviously kind of like this modern approach is customer centricity, where they don't use the customer centricity functionality as much because they first joined our community in Productboard with the understanding of like, okay, I need to prioritize things, I need a roadmap, and that's a table stakes, everybody gets it, nobody is going to argue with you that you need a plan, and that people are going to argue with you like how it should be structured and what should be on the like dates or not, right? Like big debate, kind of artificial slightly, but I shouldn't say that. Like it's an important conversation because it depends what you're trying to communicate. But that that again, that's so many companies don't think about how you got the things on the roadmap first. And so what's happening with our customers is like, hey, Productboard, I need road mapping. Great, you have amazing road mapping functionality. It's like, oh, these insights, that's cool. Oh, I can justify it, I can explain it, I can show to the teams why we're building it. Oh, that's amazing. Oh, now we have the shared understanding because we all in the room looked at some of the question, the insights, and you kind of hear it from the horse's mouth, right? It's like, yeah, that's great. And so that's sometimes what happens in terms of the adoption. but still many people just, don't subscribe to it. It's like, I know I should do it, but you need to get there. Maybe next quarter, maybe, yeah. And, and look at our job as, creators of the software. And then also I think frequently about what we can do to help share best practices and help evangelize the best practice approach. So our job is to do that, right? That's why we have the community, so that people kind of, hear from each other, and so that we empower them and we help them explain to the people outside of the core product team, like why this is important, how to use the system in the best way, and how it's really going to help you get the right products to market faster, which is, hopefully the business side of the company cares about that, right? The right products, which means the most valuable products to the market as fast as possible. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'm going to jump over another question that came in. What is your opinion on having a client-facing roadmap? How detailed or vague should it be? How often should it be updated? How often should it be shared?
Yeah. I think that the closer or more transparent relationship you have with your customers or your clients, the better, because it goes again to the fundamental principle of understand what the customers need, and the closer relationship you have, the more you communicate with them, the more trust you have, and the easier information flows, and so on and so on. So I think you should. And frankly, people expect it. Like these days, like, hey, tell me where you're headed. Like, they buy into the roadmap and into the vision, and they want to know where you're going, because they're evaluating alternatives, and they need the confidence that, if they use your product, that it's going to evolve in the direction they need, and not in the direction that satisfy needs of somebody else. And so, thumbs up for that. Second, like, how frequently? I think that this should be as up to date as possible. Like, update it, like whenever there's a change, whenever there's something that is meaningful. Obviously, you need to be sensitive in terms of, like, are you actually launching it, or is there a change in terms of, hey, it now we are moving it from discovery to delivery, or it's going from idea stage to, like, we're gonna do more exploration, or it's going into labs versus general availability. It's obvious, like, nuance, right? And larger customers need predictability, and you can't just, like, change things without proper context communication, and so on. Like, your customer success managers need to communicate, and so on and so on. In terms of the details, it shouldn't set the expectation. It's always better to surprise positively than to disappoint. It's general. I'm not saying anything to people here. And so, if the nature of the relationship is such that you can say now, soon, later, or like some buckets that are not specific time frames, that totally makes sense, and I would stick to that, because things might change, things might slip. Like, we all know how software development works, but in some other cases where, like, your release of the software needs to be tight, and like, there's dependencies that are very specific, internal processes, or people need to change integrations or something like that, then you need to be very specific. And so I would argue that's why if you have a complex set of customers, especially in the B2B world, right, and the needs differ, you need a system that helps you manage all this, because you want to communicate different level of granularity and information to the different parties and audiences, which is one of the big propositions of a product like Productboard, because it's just, like, impossible to do it in PowerPoints, right? In PowerPoints, it's just, okay, here's a roadmap, and like, how many slices of the roadmap are you able to do and keep updated, right? It's like, as opposed to having a view that has high-level buckets for a set of customers, and then having much more precise roadmap for the largest customers that really need the details, but it's all in sync, right? Because you can map the vague buckets to the time buckets, right? It's just like a different lens, right, or different granularity.
Yeah, I know we utilize our portal quite a bit for that, and we do much more of, like, a quarterly kind of projection out, giving people a sense of, like, what's coming next in broad buckets. helping you understand what we might be thinking about in terms of core problems and areas. But then also, as you mentioned, like taking them through the life cycle as we actually decide to move forward on that side. So Portal can be a really valuable tool for that side.
Yeah, for sure.
I want to jump in with another question, and then we'll jump over maybe the one from the person here that we've got. But you were really foundational in shaping kind of Productboard's thoughts on product excellence, particularly the perspective and the practice on that. I know you worked a lot with our other team members as well on that collaboratively, but you were a big part of that. As a busy founder and CEO, like how do you remain engaged today in discovery? Like ultimately, you have to have an opinion about where our product's going to. You have to have some thoughts on that side. But how do you remain close to the customer when you're this busy, when you're doing this job that you're doing today, which isn't the product manager anymore, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, everybody's busy, just in different ways. Yep. And so, yeah, I'm not like, formally running product organization anymore. But if you are in the product organization and you're a senior person in the product organization, your ability to understand the market, signals, it's changing, or because if you are on the front lines, if you're like an individual PM with an individual product team, like the area that you're focused on, and you need to figure out how to surface the insights that are relevant up, right? And to decide to the other teams that benefit from it. And so my point is that the higher up you are in the organization, the more disconnected you are from the details of these cases. And you need to have a system and kind of like a, like a communication fabric or an information sharing environment where you make sure that the right things bubble up or, get shared to the other teams, and vice versa, that the context and the strategic, framework and all that justification that drives tops down the execution gets shared. And so you're asking me specifically, but I'm so hungry to hear the combination of directly talking to customers, which I do, and as every senior product leader should do, like, go to quarterly business reviews and just like, go talk to the customers directly, customer advisory boards, whatever it is, as well as get the input from the individual teams on the front lines and make sure that the right things bubble up. And, we use Productboard for that, obviously, like, we have the insights in there. And, when people want to quickly find out justification, like they just go like, look, here's, this customer, this customer, this customer. And whenever there's something that I feel like, the whole or the broader organization would benefit from, I forward it to Productboard, like an email from a customer or something that competitor is doing, right? Like I take a screenshot and I put it in Productboard. I highlight something like, hey, interesting use case, interesting messaging, interesting, whatever. It's important because it's all driven by the desire to make sure that the customer context is shared across the company. I really want us to have a mobile app where I would have like topics that I follow, and like for the specific customer segments or VIP customers, right? Like, hey, notify me of anything that, when you complain, feature requests, something that we built and they're happy about, because I want to have the finger on the pulse as a CEO or as a head of product, or, I mean, again, as a director of product, like you should have that level of understanding for everything that's in your charter. Like whether it's however it's defined, products component wise or persona wise or sort of use cases wise. It depends how people are organized. But that's critical. It's part of the job.
Yeah, that's cool. That's really cool. I'm going to jump over to the other question that we've got here. What will change about how we build products in the next 5 years? I guess we want the vision of the future here.
Yeah, the easy visionary question and the attempt to come up with something insightful and unique. I think along the lines of what we've been talking about, it is a big shift, the customer centricity, and like really adopting the framework where you start with customers and the the segments and so on. Like that's a big trend, and it's going to be defining how products are made. The collaborative aspect with the customers, I think that is going to be even more important. And the question about how you share the roadmap, people expect you to respond to any question. Like, if something's not working, they put it on social media right away. Like, the impatience, the rate of change is changing so quickly that you have to be open, and you will have to be transparent even more than we've been in the past. And so think of it as kind of opening up is happening, across the entire industry. Because the problem is that if you're not open, you are slower, because the feedback loop is shorter, and you don't get a second chance now. I mean, you see how quickly companies grow. And you see it now during COVID, right? Like how quickly grow to be $1 billion company. And then obviously we are seeing, some major adjustments now as well. It's just like my point is, it's so volatile, and the speed and rate at which a competitor can show up and eat your lunch is so high that the speed is more important than ever. And we've always talked about it, like in any business, like business 101, like, how quickly you move to your market and how quickly, you outcompete is obvious, but it's like, it's palpable now. Like, you don't get a second chance because people have alternative for everything. And if they try your product and it sucks, simplification, obviously, along which dimensions for whom, but that, then they're going to go somewhere else. And then the switching costs, like how highly you're differentiated, it's not going to be big enough, and you lose them, and they're not going to be your customers ever, and they will be lost. So, so I would say that this is the big trend, and the collaborative nature. And I think that the way product is perceived inside companies is still dramatically changing. There is still the change towards like product making and owning the decisions with, and in collaboration, engineering, this design, like, that product core. But then beyond that, sales and marketing, customer success, the companies that operate the fastest are the companies that share the information across the entire company, not just within the product groups, but with customer success and sales and marketing and support and partnerships and BD. And they react quickly. And so I feel like that's the change. It's like a collaborative nature to it, as opposed to like product management in a silo.
Yeah, it almost sounds like in some ways, like it's as much of any of these things, they're not really necessarily new. It's more of a maturing of each of those different elements in the practice of product and how we make choices. And you're seeing that both in terms of the context of the speed at which that's happening, but also in the context of the maturity and how it's happening. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. But there are shifts in the industry as well that are driving it, because like people who grew up with new technology and new social expectations are entering the ranks of the product managers, and they have, they're pushing for different patterns. They're pushing for design patterns, or just like, different way of communication, right? Like different like mode of operation really for the companies. And so that's going to be, again, like, big shift for product management, but it's kind of like innovation evolution, Yeah. Digitization happening everywhere. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's cool. Okay, I'll jump into another question here from Victor. As Productboard scales globally, did localization impact the product? Language, culture, work habits, etc.
Yeah, we haven't localized the product, like, the core interface yet. We definitely intend to, because we understand that, the global markets and the needs are there. You can customize the portal. You can, translate some of the components, and so that's going to be the first frontier for us to do that. But in general, I mean, I remember when I talked to Mikkel Swain from Zendesk, he said that, in the early days of Zendesk, it was a major driver of growth was the global expansion, and they invested into localization very early on. And it's just, again, strategic decision when it's the right time and when you have the resources, and when you're going to focus on that. But yeah, definitely new markets. That's
if we think of this in the context of Productboard, like how has our globalization maybe impacted our product organization in some ways, like our culture, our work habits? I don't know if that's the intention of this question, so I want to like maybe try to approach it.
No, I mean, yeah, it makes sense, like language, culture, work habits, and so on. In our case, we were distributed and we had international team from the early days. So it's not like we were only here in San Francisco, and everything was super homogeneous. And I mean, San Francisco is not a homogeneous place in the first place, but so like it's not. I think that the challenge is more for us. I mean, obviously, there's going to be markets like we don't have a presence in Asia Pacific, and we don't have like a physical office. We have I don't know 30 plus nationalities. The company, it's a very diverse place. But there's gonna be expansion, so that's gonna influence it. But the challenge just comes with the scale, because if you're smaller, even if you're multinational team, you're small. If you can still understand differences and people know each other and so on, and you don't have this like separate cliques and pockets, and with scale that's gonna change. And I've seen it in larger companies where then you have much stronger potential for clashes and misunderstandings, because there's like critical mass of people who feel like they're different enough from the others to kind of pick fights. So you were proactively investing there and making sure that people understand each other. It's like one of our values, togetherness, and that it translates into very concrete actions that we do in terms of understanding each other and bringing people together and understanding that we're all humans and doesn't matter where you live and where you like what your background is, both genetic or cultural, and just build trust and respect each other and collaborate together effectively and efficiently as a result.
Yeah, well, that's good. That's good to share. Got a question here from Samir that just came in. Who or what or who was your toughest customer conversation? What did you learn and what did you ignore?
So I must say that so far with Productboard, like me personally, I didn't have any like disrespectful, violent, conversation. I've seen those in my past life where people would physically throw chairs at each other in meetings. Wow. So that yeah, I know it's crazy. Like I mean people are crazy, but I mean, I've definitely had tough conversations where people didn't feel like we're serving the needs that they have, or they were in tough situation because the complexity on their side was, and like the politics on their side were not favorable, and it's I mean it's double hard if you're arguing with somebody who, or like arguing like you're negotiating with somebody who doesn't believe in the decision, and then it's kind of like that's so like, hey, I know that procurement is saying that we need, like we don't really need it, and this is like, how am I navigating this? Like what can I do, because there's just like not alignment on the side of the customer. And and then obviously like what you ignore. It's hard because sometimes that you're going to lose a customer because strategically you're not going to be able to align your timeline with their timeline. And that just, it's like, hey, I know we are on that. This is our vision. We are on the track, but like, we're not going to be able to get done what you need because we are prioritizing this other, body of work. And you can explain the reasons. I mean, that's what you should do, right? In order to be trusted party, like you have some justification. It's not just like ad hoc thing. But that's hard. Like the conversations where I feel like, hey, this is not part of our vision, and we are not a project management tool that's gonna help you manage your marketing campaigns. Like that's easy, right? That's easy to say. It's like you have a very strong conviction strategically. The harder conversations are the timing ones. And there you just like, I always approached it from, hey, here it is. This is the strategy. This is transparently how we think about it. I understand that it might not be aligned with your timeline, but that's this is the situation. So either bear with us and continue the relationship, or I'm sorry and like we can't help, but
yeah, you're gonna have to find another. Yeah, be transparent about it. Exactly.
Yeah, find a different solution, alternative, or like figure out a way how to bridge that period.
Yeah, and also just reminding you, I guess, that we're always here when they're ready to come back.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I'm for sure. It's just like this conversation is easier at the beginning, right? When they're evaluating you, and you're gonna say, "Hey, I completely respect it. It's like, we'll be here. Eventually, you'll come around. We'll keep building it. So please come back." It's just
Cool.
frustrating if people invested and then you can't satisfy everything they need.
So we've got a few more minutes left. I'm going to wrap up with one question, maybe on my side, and then we'll move on and finish up the session today. But thinking maybe a little more blue sky. If you had to create another product in your life, start another new company, create something new, what would it be and why?
I mean, I don't know what would it be right now. It's not like I have a plan, like when I'm done with Productboard, this is what I'm gonna do. It's like I really love what we're doing here, and I honestly think that we barely scratched the surface of everything that can be built specifically in the product maker space. Like there's so much more that there's frankly no products for, So saying that though, I just, as everyone else, I experience daily pain points that don't have great solutions. Like personal CRM, like it's such a pain for me to manage the relationships, like who I know, who I reached out to, who should I reach out to, internally at the company. Like, how am I communicating with the key people across the company? And am I nurturing the relationships? Am I sharing the information in the right way? It's just like, it's such a big, it comes with the scale. Like, I don't know a product that can help me with that. I have an idea for a solution in my head, and I would love to build that just because it's like, it's cool. Like I know the pain points so well. And build that. But then look at any from again my perspective, right? Like as you can see, I'm going after the needs that I understand the most at our company. Like in any business process of the company, like I feel like there's an opportunity to out innovate and to build a better product. I mean, I obviously have products and companies that I think are doing an amazing job, right? Like, and the products, like I would want to compete with them because we'd never catch up. But some of the like back office, and it's an old school word, but some of the operations processes, and like there's so much innovation that can be done.
Yeah. Sorry, I know I'm putting you on the spot there, because definitely I don't see you as going anywhere right now. You're really passionate about what we're doing. I think that's the main piece, but it was just, curious if there was something that was like the back of your dog in here.
Honestly, if anybody has like a good personal CRM, I mean, I don't know. LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, emails, like all of it. Like, please let me know. Like, I want to manage the relationships. I want to have a list of people that I want to keep close ties with, and I need some analysis. Like, when did I talk to them? What are the topics? Like, I know that this is a category that people are working on.
Just that's awesome. That's awesome. So Hubert, thank you again. Really, really appreciate the time today. Everything you brought to this conversation. We're going to wrap things up. Again, thanks everybody for attending. We have a post-event survey, and I'll make that available here quickly in the chat as well. I encourage you to please fill that out. Let us know. We like to track how we're doing on these events, whether you got value from today's conversation and everything, and you have a chance there to win as well, a bit of a prize or a gift from us. We'd love to have you as well continue the conversation here. Any questions we didn't get to from people, or any questions you do still have for Hubert, feel free to open a conversation within the community. Hubert's in there too, and can certainly jump in and share your thoughts and provide more answers on that side. We've also got some really great events coming up. We do events here in the community every Thursday. So next week, March 3rd, we're meeting with Chad Woodford. He's going to take us through a little bit of a meditative moment to help us clear our heads and be better at managing the stress of product and the work that we do on that side. So welcome you to come join us for that. Joe Witadowski is going to be joining us for a fireside chat on building a learning muscle in your product team on March the 10th. And then we've also got 3 members of our own community as well joining us, Rachel, Sam, and Sam, for a fireside chat on navigating your career in product. And we've got lots of other events after these as well that we're working on and planning on that side. And again, lots of ways that when you can get involved inside the community, whether that's joining our roundtables that we do each month, whether that's participating in our Meet a Maker program where you can get matched one-to-one with other people in the community, or whether you want to put your hand up and actually be a speaker, be a Hubert, come join us on that side and be participant on that end. We'd love to have you. We're really particularly interested in encouraging some of our first-time speakers, maybe those from underrepresented groups, to sign up and join and share a voice here too on that side. So again, everybody, thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you, Hubert, again, for your time and energy. And we wish you the best of a Thursday. Happy Thursday, as Hubert might say. We'll see you all soon. Thank you again.
Happy Thursday indeed.
All right, take care.